Welcome to the Love That For You podcast, where every week you're invited to dream big, laugh often, and celebrate the extraordinary stories of those who inspire. Your story matters, and I love that for you. We are like super informal over here, Regina. This is one of those podcasts where it's genuinely just us having a fun conversation and becoming real life friends.
Okay.
And then we're just going to allow the whole world to listen in if they want. So no pressure.
Sounds good.
Well, I am so excited. Regina Boyd, welcome to the Love That For You podcast. I am so excited to just get to know you and talk about you and your book today. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
We are going to have a blast today because you recently wrote a book and we're going to talk all about it. I had told you right before we started recording, I was like, I've read your book. It's amazing. And not only is the content good, and I feel like anyone would say this, but when I read it, as I'm reading it, I'm thinking, oh, like I really need this message right now. Like I'm just highlighting everything. So I'm really grateful that our paths have crossed in this way so that we can get to know each other a little bit more. So Regina, would you just share with me just who are you? Where are you from? Who is your family? Like who is Regina? How did you get to be where you are today?
Yeah, I currently live in Orlando, Florida. This is where I've lived the longest, so I consider myself a Floridian. My dad was in the military.
Okay.
We moved around a little bit here and there. But yeah, I'm a wife, a mom, have an awesome daughter who's wrapping up kindergarten. I can't believe I'm saying that out loud. But
So cute.
it's the best to watch her just having fun, living her life day to day. But
Yeah.
yeah, a little bit of how I came to be a counselor, I guess. It's kind of weird. I think I was always the person who people would just naturally open up to without me trying. So I remember at recess talking to friends about their parents getting divorced or something, and me being really surprised and startled by the information they were sharing with me,
Wow.
because that wasn't something I was seeking out or anything. So I sort of learned I'm the person on the airplane who people open up to. And so I learned over time that, I don't know, there was some type of gift there with listening or something like that. And I was always interested in psychology too. I would say definitely by high school, I was very much interested in that. Why do people do what they do? How does the brain work? And really wanting that grew into a desire to help people, to meet them where they're at, to journey alongside them. And so for me, therapy and counseling just seemed like a really good fit, a good alignment of all those things. I wouldn't say that's anything I consciously pursued since I was a child, but everything sort of
Okay.
came together and fit nicely.
Yeah. Well, I love when, a lot of people I've talked to on this podcast and even my personal life, it's neat to see when your passion and when maybe you don't even recognize it as your passion, but you just kind of realize, oh, I'm just kind of naturally good at this. And then just to kind of see how it morphs over time into the opportunities and the open doors that they come. And you're just kind of like, I guess I kind of just keep pursuing this. Like people love sharing their lives with me and I enjoy listening and I enjoy giving feedback. So it's like, I guess we'll just kind of keep moving in that direction. So did you kind of like when you went to college, were you kind of thinking, okay, maybe I go more the counselor route at that point, or were you still pretty open-minded of what you wanted to do?
No, yeah, by the time I went to college, I was set on psychology. I was going to pursue
Yeah.
that. Graduate school as well. I didn't, when I first went to college, I didn't realize you had to go to graduate school to become a therapist. So I learned that later on.
Okay. Yeah.
But yeah, especially in college, I was pretty set on it. And then heading into grad school, I was really influenced by the teachings of John Paul II and his theology of the body. And so my desire when I entered grad school was really to help families and thinking about
Mm,
relationships and how our human experience is lived so much in our connections and our relationships with other people. And so from day one, that was really my desire and my motivation. I think over the years, the Lord has added some other pieces to that, so I kind of had my tunnel
sure.
vision and he said, well, yeah, we can use this in lots of ways. but
Right.
um, but yeah, that's kind of where it all came from.
Yeah. I'm kind of thinking too, Regina, of just like in 2024, I feel like this whole concept of psychology and having a therapist and going to counseling, it's kind of in a way like trending right now, where it's like, this is a good thing. We should want this. Whereas I don't know what your experience was growing up, but I feel like my experience growing up was more of, oh, well, that's where really sick people go, and we don't need that, and you're fine. And just kind of this mindset of, oh, unless you just really have really deep mental health issues, which what does that mean? Like, you don't need any sort of further psychological training or counseling or anything like that. So, what is kind of your thought on, I guess, just like being in today's age where I go to counseling, and I have found that it has been so helpful for my life, but I also recognize that we should foster community where it's not necessarily needed. Like, maybe instead of being like everyone needs to go to counseling and everyone needs to have a therapist, what is the balance of, well, what if just our circles were emotionally healthy? What you talk about in your book of leaving loneliness behind. Like, what if we just fostered good emotional intelligence and vulnerability and trust in our relationships? Then maybe we wouldn't need it. Does that make sense? So, like, what is that balance of being healthy as we are, but also wanting to utilize the tools of people like you that have gone through extensive studies, undergraduate school, graduate school, and wanting to be our healthiest selves?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're talking about the difference between prevention versus some type of acute care. And I think if we speak in medical terminology, that might be a good analogy to draw that conclusion to. So there's a lot of things we can do preventatively to stay healthy. We can eat our vegetables, we can exercise,
Mm,
we can, but eventually we still might end up getting sick. We might catch the flu, we might have a cold. And so, even if we do everything right, there are things that still come up in our lives that might need a little extra help and support. And I think a
mm,
cold is a great example because sometimes we don't feel well and we say, okay, let me just get some extra sleep. Let me take some vitamin C and then I'll be
sure.
fine. I'll be on my way. And I think that's a great opportunity to start relying right on your friends, your family, your community when you feel like something's off. But every now and then we feel sick enough where we say, should I go to the urgent care? Should I not? I might need to get somebody to check this out. It's been a few
Right.
days. It's not really getting any
Yes.
better.
I
Um,
have not left my bed.
exactly. I'm feeling horrible
Yes.
still. I should be getting better by now. So that
Mm,
relationship wise, do I see myself repeating the same cycles, finding myself in the same place, the same frustrations, no matter what I've already tried on my own? That's a great
mm,
sign that, okay, maybe it wouldn't hurt to go and ask for that extra support. But I do absolutely think when we're doing our relationships well, when we have a solid community, it helps us get so much farther without needing that extra intervention. And that's actually one of the questions a lot of
mm,
therapists ask when we're meeting with people, or at least it's something I ask, but we want to know. We want to know about your community, the supports that you have, the people in your life, because that's going to let us know a lot about, do you have that support for you when you go home, or are you doing this on your own? And that's going to make a huge difference as far as what I want to suggest as far as steps and interventions you should take so that you have that support, because I can't be your only
mm.
support for the rest of your life. And that would be
Right.
horribly unethical for me to do that too. um, but
Right.
I want to work myself out of a job. We want you relying on your family, your friends, and yourself ultimately to get through those tough times. So,
Yeah. And I'm thinking too of people listening that are like, okay, I feel like I am fostering a good community. Like, now that we're adults, we get to choose who we surround ourselves with and the type of people that we bring into our lives and the type of people that we want to impact. So we can live in a healthy world now as an adult, but that doesn't change what might have happened when we were younger, in scenarios that we didn't control. And so I think a lot of the help that you all bring into this world too is like, hey, I'm so glad that you seem to be thriving now, but also there were things that happened out of your control that are going to affect how you live now. And how can we can't go back and change what happened, but I think you talk about this towards the end of your book of like, we still can heal that part. Like, we can go back and heal it so that you live a healthy current present life. So, I just
Yeah.
think that's incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's some things a lot of people say, like, oh, well, why can't we just move on? That's in the past. Let's just leave it alone. And I think to a certain extent, that's true. We don't need to constantly be dredging things
Yeah.
up just for the sake of it. But sometimes
Mm,
there's these key moments and elements that happen in our relationships, right? If you have an argument with a loved one, sometimes it's important to talk about that, especially if it was meaningful and impactful, just to have that opportunity to process it so that you can move on. Otherwise, we're
right.
just sweeping it under the rug, and that's not always helpful.
Yeah. That's what I like to do, Regina, though. That is the simpler way to handle it. So
Simpler in the short term, but not in the long
yeah, that's
term.
right. That's right. 10 years later, and I'm like, why can I still not stop thinking about this?
Right, right.
um, Yeah, definitely handling it and facing the pain and not running from it. That is for sure the wisest move. Okay, right before we jump into the book, I just need to tell you that Orlando is like my favorite place in the world because I'm a huge Disney fan, and I
Nice.
just feel like you need to know that as we continue this conversation. I love Orlando. I am there several times a year.
Oh,
So the
nice.
next time I go back, I will virtually wave from the castle to you.
That sounds great. Sounds wonderful. I love Orlando.
um
Yeah.
it is a super great place. And I love anywhere, well, I love really anywhere along the coast. It's just wonderful. Do
Mm.
you where you're at, are you guys going to the beach often? Because that for you is like a couple hour drive, right?
Well, it
Like to
depends.
get to the coast?
Yeah, it depends. There's a few angles with which, depending on which highway you decide to take, which beach you're going to go to. So, probably the
Right.
fastest beach I could get to is about 45 minutes. And
Okay.
then there are other beaches that might take an hour and 15. Then some other beaches that are 2.5. Yeah. So, it just sort of
Yeah.
depends on where you want to go.
Yeah, that's amazing. We love that. Big Orlando fan. That's great. Okay, Regina, let's talk about this book because I feel like the message of this book is so timely and so needed because it's a book all about loneliness. And raise your hand if you've never felt lonely. Nobody's raising their hand. Like, we have all been in places where we have felt lonely. And I feel like I can speak for the world when I say that. So I'm just curious, out of all of the things that you have done and all of the people that you have helped, and in your own journey of being a wife and a mom and everything, like, why was the message of loneliness one that you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, it really was at the heart a book about relationships. I kind of think of the book as a handbook for how to do in any relationship, not just romantic
Mm-hmm.
relationships, but family, friends, kids, parents, whatever it is, coworkers. And it as I was writing the book, this theme of loneliness sort of came up out of it.
Hmm.
And that's sort of how I realized it and framed it. It's really because why relationships are so
Yeah.
important is because we're trying to avoid and meet that basic need of belonging and avoiding loneliness. It can be so hurtful.
Right. That's fascinating that you approached it more on the relationship side. And then after looking at it, it's like, oh, okay, well, this is in relationships. I mean, I think of myself personally, I have I am extremely fortunate. Like, the Lord has given me really beautiful relationships, but then I see where I don't have good relationships, and it's almost like a withdrawal of the relationship or like a rejection, and like at the lowest point is the loneliest feeling of like there's just nobody here. I'm not married yet. So for me, as I'm reading this book, I'm thinking about it very much in like a romantic way of like wanting to have a life partner, and that's not something that the Lord has allowed in my life up until this point. And so for me, it's like, okay, well, when I'm at my lowest point, I can feel that loneliness and I can trick my mind. I think this is straight from the enemy of just being like, no one's choosing you.
Mm,
No one's loving you. Yeah, your family loves you because they have to. They're your family, or your friends love you, but you've spent significant amount of time with them, and also they have their own lives, but like at the end of the day, no man is choosing you. And it's like, while that actually is factual, there is so much of a lie behind that of like, okay, but I have also been given so much. And so I feel like your book is very encouraging because it's like, how do we actually walk ourselves out of the fact that really none of us are alone? And of course, there's going to be exceptions and very deep and tragic, and you share several tragic stories in your book of people that have experienced very deep loneliness and loss, but that's not how it has to be, that's not how it has to remain to be. So can you walk us through kind of because you share it's like 5 keys of how can we leave this loneliness behind, specifically through relationships. So can you walk us kind of through those 5 and why you came up with those?
Sure. The five keys are authentic connection, communicating through conflict, vulnerability and trust, healing, so healing after a betrayal, and then self gift. And it took some brainstorming. I sort of was thinking about what are all the things that are important within a relationship. And of course, there's more than five things when you think about a healthy friendship or a healthy relationship.
Sure.
But I just sort of kept coming back to these five. These five seem to be a good way to summarize everything that's important. And so that's
Mm.
sort of how I came up with it. Do you want me to break down the keys a little
I would
bit?
love that.
Okay.
Yes, I would love that.
So authentic connection is really about, again, that sense of belonging. Do we have a place where we can go where things just click? Sometimes you interact with people and things click and there's a flow and a vibe and it goes well. And other people, you're kind of like, I don't know if this is my type of person.
Yeah.
Um, and so there's something nice about an authentic connection where we can put our guard down, we can just sort of be ourselves. But the other piece to that is we have to maintain the connection. If we're not putting in the intentional effort to keep that connection going, then that just
Mm,
becomes some nice person I met in the store and had a nice conversation with, and then we move on with our lives and we're strangers
yeah.
and we never see each other
Right.
again. So there has to be some
Right.
intentional effort to maintain that authentic connection that's really foundational for any relationship. And then
Mhm.
trust and vulnerability. As you get to know someone, there's sort of these increasing or deeper levels of intimacy within the friendship. So, again, if you think about the tiers of a relationship, stranger, acquaintance, friend,
Mhm.
colleague, family member, best friend, spouse, whoever it is, there's varying levels of intimacy that we experience. And part of that is because you've started to reciprocate opening up to one another. You're not going to open up and share your deepest secrets with the stranger in the grocery store the same way you are with your trusted childhood friend or something like that, or your
Right.
spouse. And
Right.
it's tricky because there's always a risk there, especially initially when you don't know somebody that well. If I open up and share, how do I know if I can trust this person with this information? Are they going to be able to keep this secret safe if it's something I don't want shared?
Mm.
But also, are they going to receive it well? Are they going to make fun of me? Are they going to criticize me and on my situation? Or is it going to be kind of hostile if I share it and not what I want to hear? And so, anytime we share, somebody receives it well, we learn that we can trust them, and they reciprocate that by sharing something else that takes the relationship a level deeper. So, there's that
Right.
risk in the vulnerability, but it's so important. And then being able to communicate through conflict, I think, was really important. I'm a therapist. I can't help it. We have to talk about communication.
Yeah.
And so it's funny because a lot of people think, oh, I communicate all the time. What's the problem? I don't need help with that area. But conflict is tricky because that's where we often make mistakes, where we say things we regret, don't always handle things. We're not always at our best because emotions are high. So we don't
Mm.
always handle things well. And so I thought it was important in order to preserve and maintain a friendship in the long run, you have to navigate conflict well. And if you think about those people you feel closest to, it's because you navigated those conflicts well. The people that you no longer speak to, it's because that didn't go well, right? And
Yeah.
so the
Yeah.
long lasting relationships are really because you guys were able to get messy and figure it out.
Mm.
Um, and then after that, if it's even deeper than that, finding that healing through the betrayal. I think conflict transitions us into that healing space of, even though you hurt me and you were wrong, this is how I communicate that. Now, how do we get to a place where we're reconciled, where there's true healing, where again, we can develop that trust again? Um, and
Mm,
hopefully get back to that place that we once were. And we
mm.
can't do any of those keys without being a gift to one another. And so if we're willing to um, will the good of the other, put others' needs before ourselves, it's always in giving that we receive ultimately. And so if we think about that, that's really the glue of maintaining a healthy relationship is, can I give myself away in love ultimately? And that takes forgiveness when it's hard. That takes all kinds of things to keep that flame alive, so to speak.
Right. Right. So much of your book, as I read through it, these concepts, while they're simple, I guess is a word you could say, they're very deep concepts, and they could make and break your relationships. But I feel like the way you wrote it was in such a like just a simple way for anyone to be able to read and understand. I really appreciated that you like wrote it in a way that did not feel textbook. It felt very like you were sitting right next to me having this conversation, very relational in the way that you wrote it. Um, I'd love to know too how, because for me, I am a Christian, and I feel like so much of how I live my life is viewed through a biblical worldview. So I'd love to know too, because you speak of that in the book as well. So how has your faith like, how does faith, in your opinion, allow us to have the best relationships?
Yeah, I think it's everything. Our faith informs so much of what we do. It's the difference between, I think of the Good Samaritan, right? It's the difference between stopping to help the person on the side of the road and not. We
Yeah.
do those things because Christ ultimately led that example and asks that of us. And if we're trying to emulate him more in our lives, there's lots of ways we can do that in our relationships as well, like putting others before ourselves. I think a parent
Yes.
child relationship is a really easy example of that. Parents are constantly putting their kids' needs before their own. But I think
Mm,
we can do that with our friends as well. We can let somebody else choose the restaurant we're going to that evening. We can come to their aid when they're in a crisis, when some situation has happened for them. Are we cooking the meals? Are we spending time with them on the phone or in person? And so I
mm,
think all of those are ways to come to someone's assistance and again, show love and support and care that's really beyond what's convenient for me. And
yeah.
it really is the difference between, again, a deep friendship versus an acquaintance situation, and really somebody experiencing that authentic love, which I think is part of what we're called to do is sharing God's love with the world and with others.
Yeah.
And we can only do that when we really extend.
Right. I mean, he's told us so many times, it's because I have loved you, now go and love others, and I'll go make disciples. That's so good. One of the verses that you share is one of my favorite verses where we're told that he has come to give us life abundantly. But yet we look at the life around us and we're like, sometimes we're feeling like nothing in my life feels abundant right now, but yet the Lord wants me to live an abundant life. And I think that's just what I keep going back to too in my personal relationship with the Lord is like, I know that everything in my relationships, surface level in this world, are allowed by him, but also fueled through my relationship with him. Like he is going to be the one that is going to allow me to not feel lonely, because even if I have nothing, like even if I lose my parents and I lose my family and I lose everything and I lose my home, and like even if everything is gone, there is still a hope deep within my soul that there is something more, and there is a God who loves me, like, and he is still with me. And I just feel like, even for people listening that might not share that same faith that we do, but it's like, I would just encourage them of, if you're feeling lonely, if you don't have that relationship with the Lord, like, pursue that, because that is what is keeping me from feeling like, oh, there's no way I can make it in this life. It's not the way I would have written it for myself. Why am I even trying? No, like I have such a higher calling. I have so much more hope of even if I don't have what I feel like I want, or even if things aren't going my way, I still have so much healing and hope through my relationship with the Lord. So I feel like faith has everything to do with it as well, because he is the author and finisher of our faith. And I love that you wrote at the end too. I wrote it down, and you also recently said it, but how God gives us our gifts to give away for the good of others. And it's like what the Lord has given me, that is in service to others. So when I am my healthiest self, I can serve others in the best way that then makes them, it allows them to be their healthiest. But, you can't give from an empty cup. So that is so good. I feel like I could just like ramble on forever because I love this topic. Um, was there a part of this book, Regina, that was like difficult to write, or maybe a part of it that just like hit a ping for you of that was just like harder to write than others?
Yeah, I definitely would say my story with infertility was a little bit harder. It's
Hmm.
funny because I had some other stories to share in that place. And I felt like the Lord was calling me to share that story, but I was
Hmm.
kind of delaying a little bit, if I'll be
Yeah.
honest, because it's hard to be public with things, I feel like. But at least for me, I've
Yeah.
always been a little bit more of a private person. But yeah, I just felt those nudges that the Lord was saying, I really think this is the story you should share. And one
Yeah.
of the ways he kind of finalized that for me was the editor. So we're going through it, and I would give, drafts, and she would give her feedback and make little changes here or there. And so in this one particular part in the book, she commented, I had an alternative story there. And she said, this story feels a little safe. And I was like, "Oh,
Oh,
darn it,"
wow.
as soon as she said that, I knew, I was like, "Fine, Lord, fine,
Yes.
you win," we'll go there.
Wow.
So yeah, she really drew that out of me, so that, I mean, I think, the team there at Ave Mary Press is amazing. They know what they're doing. So,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
yeah, so I think, it was just, in my humanity, delaying what I already knew should have been. But, I think it's exactly what it needed to be and what it should have
Yeah.
been, because if I want people to be vulnerable, I have to be willing to model that and do that myself. I gotta walk the walk,
Right.
you know?
Right. Right. And it very well could be that that specific story is, I'm sure as people have read your book, like they're like, oh, I resonate with that. Like that could be so healing for someone else to read of, oh, I'm not alone. She faced this as well. I think
Right.
that is so important. It is, of course we need to handle, like, as things happen and as difficult situations arise, not everything that is in our life needs to be public or needs to be used to make money or all of these things. But at the same time, we need to recognize that, I think one thing that the enemy does is he is like super isolating and will make us feel like we're the only ones who feel something. And so then it's almost like this shame, like maybe like in your infertility journey, you almost maybe felt like the shame of, well, who else is feeling like this? Like I can't talk to anyone about this. But in reality, we've seen the statistics of how prevalent infertility is among women today. So it's getting to the point where it's like, okay, you know what? I actually can talk about this. And this is not even to say that everyone needs to find their strongest battle and hurdle and then just go proclaim it from the rooftop. That's not what I'm saying. But I think that with wise counsel and as you process through what you're going through, there is a time and place where you can say, like, hey, let's be vulnerable. Like you said, like, let's risk taking this relationship to the next level by being vulnerable. And then you just never know how God is going to use that to bless others. And it's most times I have found in the difficulties where our relationships are strengthened and where we are grown even spiritually in our walk with Christ. So I think that's beautiful. I love that you included that. And I think that that is going to resonate so well with so many people as they read the book. So,
Yeah, I wish I had found something like that at the time that I needed it. So absolutely.
yeah.
Mhm.
That's the other thing I feel like with writing books is just like, okay, what is the message that needs to go out that I have that I can't find? Did you find that to be true for when you were writing this book?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's lots of relationship books out there, there's so many
Sure.
good resources. But I just felt like in my sessions and in my work, I feel like I noticed the same themes constantly coming up.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, there was a little bit of like, all right, let's get this out here. Let's see if this helps.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Regina, where can we find you on socials and where can we get your book?
I am on Instagram at Boyd Counseling Services. Boyd Counseling Services. I'm on Facebook as well, Regina Boyd LMHC, but Instagram is really where the party's at. And the book you can
Yes.
find at Amazon or Ave Maria Press, or through my
Okay.
website, reginaboyd.com.
Perfect. That sounds so good. And for someone who's listening, Regina, if someone's listening right now and they're thinking, oh man, I definitely need this book and I just have more questions, is there a way that they can get in contact with either your counseling agency or you personally? Is Instagram that best method?
Yeah, Instagram or I would say the website really. You can
Okay.
message or email through there, but either way, I'm on Instagram quite a bit. So if you wanted to
Yeah.
reach out, I'm sure we could have a little chat.
Yeah, that sounds so good, and I'm also thinking that this book would even make, like, just a really sweet gift if someone's listening and you're like, "Hey, my friend could really use this right now." Yeah, they probably could. So if you're listening, go buy 2 copies of this book, share one with a friend, because I just feel like this is gonna be so helpful for so many people. Regina, is there anything that we didn't say that you think we should add to the conversation?
No, I was just gonna add to what you're saying now. Also, there's a workbook to go with it. So if you were gonna share with a
Yes.
friend, do the workbook
Yes.
together, right? Do it in a community, develop your relationships with people. You can share your answers, kind of treat it small group style, book study style. So yeah, I think that's a great idea.
I'm so glad you said that. Yes. And even at the back of just the normal book are so many helpful prompts and questions to ask too. We didn't even talk about the updating your roadmaps, but I loved that section of your book of just like deepening your relationships. And as you look at I won't, people just need to read the book, but the concept is looking at a roadmap. There's so many details. It's overwhelming, so much information. You don't feel like you need it until you're lost. And then you like need to find that minute little thing. And so our relationships are in that, in a similar vein as that. And so you have really good prompts at the end of your book too, of like, how can we just deepen relationship? What are specific questions that we can ask about all different topics? So you're just giving us so many resources for free. I feel like that we don't deserve, but we're grateful for.
Oh, good. I'm so glad you experienced it that way. That was my goal, was to
Yeah.
give practical things that people can use and implement, immediately. So,
Right, right. Now that we have the head knowledge, let's have the heart knowledge and put it into action. I love that. I love when people share like that. That's so helpful. Well, Regina, I have one final question for you. Because the show is called Love That For You, I would love to know what you're loving right now in life.
oh my goodness, this is such a hard question, but for some
I know,
reason,
it's the most open-ended question
it
ever.
is. For some reason, my head is going to Spindrift drinks. I
Yes.
have a slight, obsession possibly, but I had to go on a field trip with my not I had to go. I got to go on a field trip with my daughter, with her class to the zoo, and I
Fun.
definitely made sure my water bottle was filled with a few of those spindrifts because it was a very hot day, 96
Yes.
degrees. So
Ooh,
that's my
Florida
lifesaver,
heat.
man. That's how I stay hydrated.
Yeah.
That's
Is there a specific flavor that you like?
Oh gosh, I like so many. So I really enjoy the grapefruit.
Okay.
Um, but I also love, oh gosh, they just came out with a new one. They have a mint one that
Oh.
yeah, it's like called no hito, like mojito, but without alcohol or
Uh-huh.
something. That one's really
Interesting.
fun too.
I'm
So
sure that's, like, really refreshing on a super hot day.
yes. Oh, and
Are
peach
you
strawberry. Peach strawberry is very good.
uh I love anything peach. Yum. Are you into like poppies or the Olipop drinks? Like, do you also like all of those brands as well?
So I just started to try a few of the poppies. Yes, I was very impressed, especially with the root beer. I was
Yeah.
surprised at how much it actually tasted like root beer. So
Yep.
yes,
Yep.
yep,
I live right next to a Whole Foods, and so I'll sometimes walk. I'm like in a shopping center, so I can just like walk around, which is really I love it. It's so great. So I'll sometimes for lunch I'll just walk over to Whole Foods and I'll grab something like in the hot bar or I'll grab a sandwich and then I'll go pick out a drink. And their drink selection is like there's no normal anything. It's like all of these you know,
I think
prebiotic, probiotic, collagen,
right,
everything,
right,
which I'm not complaining. I'm like, I'm kind of here for it. I'm not here that they're each $10, but
right,
but I love the idea that we're trying to give people a tasty beverage, but also pack it with nutrients and vitamins and all of these things. So
right.
I'm here for that whole train. So I
Absolutely.
love that.
Yeah.
I love that. Well, Regina, this was so good. Thank you so much for taking some of your time to come share about your book with us. It was really just exciting to get to know you more. And this book was personally just really encouraging and helpful for me. And I'm really excited for other people to get their hands on it too. So
Thank you so much, Morgan. Yeah, it's been really fun.
thanks for listening to this episode, friends. If you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did, make sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share the love with your friends and family. Remember, life is all about the stories we create and share, so let's keep spreading inspiration and positivity. See you next week.